I used to think the worst part about owning a pool was the maintenance, the filters, the leaves, the endless chlorine bills. But no, the real nightmare was my neighbor Karen and her little army of freeloading friends. They acted like my backyard was the community water park. Day or night, they'd sneak in, splashing around like teenagers, sipping cheap wine, blasting music, leaving behind beer bottles and soggy chips. I warned them. Politely at first. Then, firmly. But Karen just smirked and said, "Oh, don't be so selfish, it's just water. Selfish lady, it's my water, my pool, and my property." And, let's just say, when push came to shove, I figured out a way to make them regret every single unauthorized dip. Because the next time they jumped in, something happened that Karen will never forget, and neither will her hair. Before I dive into the full story, drop a comment below with your location and local time. I want to see just how far HOA drama spreads around the world. Owning a home with a backyard pool was supposed to be my little slice of paradise. After 20 years of grinding away in construction, breaking my back on job sites, I finally had the house I dreamed of: brick facade, shaded deck, a pool sparkling like a blue gem under the Texas Sunday. I'd mow my lawn, clean the gutters, skim the water, then sit back with a cold beer while my kids splashed around. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't some mansion in Beverly Hills, but it was ours, and I was proud of it. That peace didn't last long, not with Karen living next door. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the neighbor. The kind everyone warns you about, but you never believe until it's too late. Early 50s, bottle blonde with roots showing a voice that carried across the cul-de-sac like a police siren. She had once sat on the HOA board, and even though she'd been booted off for conduct unbecoming their polite way of saying she was a tyrant, she still acted like she ran the neighborhood. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, barking orders about trash bins and lawn heights, as though she were a five-star general. At first, I thought I could handle her. A nod here, a forced smile there. I figured if I stayed out of her way, she'd eventually lose interest. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman who lost interest. She was the kind who doubled down. It started small. I'd notice footprints near the pool when I got home from work, wet towels that didn't belong to us, a faint whiff of cheap perfume lingering in the air. Then I caught sight of her once through the blinds, Karen in a gaudy pink swimsuit, sipping from a wine tumbler as if she were queen of the suburbs. The first time I confronted her, I tried to be neighborly. "Hey Karen, the pool's private. I'd appreciate it if you asked first." She tilted her head back and laughed. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. We're neighbors. Neighbors share. Not pools," I shot back. Not mine, anyway. But she just waved me off, like I was an annoying waiter who'd brought the wrong order. After that, it escalated. She started bringing friends. 3 or 4 middle-aged women, plus the occasional husband or boyfriend, would waltz into my backyard like they owned the place. They'd crank up a Bluetooth speaker, blasting Bon Jovi and 90 Seconds country popping corks like it was spring break in Daytona. Once I came home to find a floaty shaped like a giant flamingo still bobbing in the water, half-deflated lipstick smudged across its plastic neck. It wasn't just annoying, it was insulting. This was my property. I paid for the chemicals, I scrubbed the algae, I balanced the damn pH levels. But when I pushed back, Karen doubled down with that smug smirk. "You're being selfish," she'd sneer. "Pools are meant to be enjoyed. What kind of neighbor locks everyone out? Selfish." That word burned me up more than anything. Selfish when I'd worked double shifts just to afford this house. Selfish when I'd built that deck with my own 2 hands. Meanwhile, she hadn't lifted a finger except to steal my peace and leave her trash behind. What really sent me over the edge was the Facebook post. One night, scrolling through my phone, I saw a picture Karen had uploaded. There she was, right in my pool, her arms thrown up in victory like she'd just conquered the world. The caption read, "Best free amenity in the neighborhood number, HOA privilege number, sharing is caring." That did it. That was the match that lit the fuse. I started documenting everything: photos of footprints, videos of Karen slipping through the side gate, screenshots of her smug Facebook posts. I considered filing a complaint with the HOA, but let's be real, those meetings are a circus, and Karen thrived in a circus. She'd turn it into a debate about community spirit and somehow make me the villain. So instead, I sat in my lawn chair one evening, staring at the pool, sipping my beer and thinking. That's when I noticed the bottle of industrial-strength bleach sitting in the corner of the shed. I usually kept it for scrubbing stubborn stains off the patio. The label practically screamed, "Caution may cause irritation," and suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, the idea hit me. I didn't need to scream at Karen. I didn't need to call the HOA. I didn't even need to involve the cops. All I had to do was let her enjoy the pool. On my terms. Because if Karen and her little entourage wanted to keep sneaking in, then fine, they'd get a pool day they would never forget. One dip and their skin would itch like fire ants at a picnic. One rinse and their precious salon-dyed hair would frizz tangle, maybe even turn a shade lighter. Nothing permanent, nothing truly dangerous, just enough to make them think twice before treating my property like Club Med. And the best part, I wouldn't have to lift a finger after the setup. They'd do it to themselves. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, grinning at the ceiling. My wife rolled over groggy. "What's so funny?" "Nothing," I whispered. "Just planning a little neighborhood hospitality." I swear I hadn't felt that alive in months. The next morning, I got up early, walked out to the shed, and stared at that bleach bottle like it was Excalibur itself. My plan was simple but effective. And if everything went the way I imagined, by the end of the week, Karen and her friends would be scratching, shrieking, and swearing off my pool forever. They wanted free spa days. Oh, I'd give them one. Just not the kind they were expecting. You'd think after a few warnings and maybe the dirty looks from me mowing the lawn while they giggled in my pool, Karen and her little posse would have gotten the message. But no, Karen wasn't the type who took hints. She was the type who'd walk through a "do not enter" sign just to prove she could. The thing about Karen was she didn't just break rules, she performed while breaking them. Every invasion into my backyard became a stage play with her as the star. The louder, the messier, the more defiant, the better. One Saturday afternoon, I pulled into the driveway after running errands. I could hear the thump of bass before I even got out of my truck. The kind of bass that rattles your ribs, cheap speakers on full blast. I walked around the side yard and stopped dead in my tracks. There were 6 of them this time: Karen, 2 of her girlfriends, a couple of men I didn't recognize, and some guy with a beer belly who looked like he hadn't seen a shirt since 1998. They were lounging on my deck chairs, splashing in my pool, popping open cans of White Claw like it was a poolside bar. Karen spotted me and raised her glass. "Oh, look who's home. Don't worry, we're just keeping the water warm for you." I clenched my jaw. "Get out, now." She smiled sweetly, the way a cat might before swatting a bird out of the sky. "Relax, neighbor. It's community spirit. You can't keep this all to yourself." My fists tightened at my sides. Community spirit. Since when did community spirit mean free access to my backyard like it was a public rec center? The worst part was the trail they left behind. Empty chip bags fluttering across the lawn, bottle caps glinting in the grass, and once, unbelievably, someone had dropped a slice of soggy pizza in the pool itself. The chlorine filter nearly choked to death on pepperoni and melted cheese. I'd wake up the next morning, step outside with my coffee, and find the water cloudy with sunscreen oil, floating straws, and the occasional half-deflated raft. It was like a frat party had moved in while I slept. But Karen didn't stop there. Oh no. She decided to turn my pool into her personal photo booth. One evening, while scrolling Facebook, I nearly spit out my drink. There she was, striking poses in the shallow end, wearing oversized sunglasses and a floppy straw hat captioning it, "Living the good life, blessed number, HOA privilege." The comments were worse. "Oh my God, Karen, you're glowing. Where is this resort? Wow, jealous. That pool is amazing." And then the kicker, neighborhood perks baby with a winky face emoji. My blood boiled so hot, I thought I'd burn a hole through the phone. She wasn't just stealing my pool, she was bragging about it, mocking me, turning her trespassing into a badge of honor. I decided to test her. The next weekend, I deliberately left the side gate unlocked. Sure enough, by noon, I could hear the telltale sound of laughter and splashing. I peered through the blinds. There they were again, Karen floating on a neon raft, sipping wine like she was Cleopatra being carried down the Nile. Her friends kicked their feet in the water, music blaring, laughter echoing across the neighborhood. I realized something in that moment. Karen didn't think I had the guts to stop her. She thought I was too polite, too neighborly, too bound by rules to really do anything. To her, I was just the grumpy guy next door who'd stomp and shout but never actually act. And I'll admit, part of me was tempted to call the cops or file an official HOA complaint. But what good would that do? Police don't rush out for neighbors swimming in my pool emergencies. And HOA meetings were basically Karen's natural habitat. She'd twist the story, make herself the victim, maybe even try to fine me for having a pool that was too tempting. No, if I wanted her to stop, I needed to hit her where it hurt, her pride, her vanity, her image. See, Karen lived for appearances. She wanted to look flawless, glamorous, untouchable. She dyed her hair religiously, rotating through shades of blonde, depending on which box dye was on sale that week. Her nails were always done, her makeup caked on thick enough to survive a hurricane. The one thing she couldn't tolerate was looking ridiculous. That was when the bleach plan went from a joke in my head to a mission, But before I could set it in motion, I had to endure one more insult. It was a Tuesday evening when I got home late from work, bone-tired. I dragged myself to the backyard, hoping for a quiet swim under the stars. Instead, I walked straight into chaos. Karen and her friends had decided to throw a night swim party. String lights dangled across my fence that I never put up. Music thumped, wine glasses clinked, and someone was grilling burgers on a portable BBQ they'd dragged into my yard without permission. I froze in disbelief. They'd turned my backyard into a carnival. I stormed toward the deck, my voice booming louder than the music. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Everyone went quiet for half a beat. Then Karen, cool as ever, raised her glass and said, "Relax, we'll clean up. You should thank us, we're keeping the place lively." That was it. That was the moment I knew no more warnings, no more begging, no more playing the reasonable neighbor. Karen wanted to keep pushing fine. I was done being the pushover. I went back inside, slammed the door, and sat down with a notepad. Step 1, chemicals. Step 2, timing. Step 3, patience. By the time I was done scribbling, I had a full-blown plan that would make any Bond villain proud. The next time Karen and her friends invaded, they wouldn't be leaving my pool with smug smiles and Instagram photos. They'd be leaving with itchy skin, frizzed-up hair, and a humiliation so sharp it would sting worse than the bleach itself. I took one last sip of my beer, leaned back in the chair, and grinned. "Game on, Karen," I muttered. Game on. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I prefer it served in a swimming pool, chilled, chlorinated, and laced with just enough bleach to ruin your day without landing me in prison. After that night swim fiasco, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I walked past the shed and saw that big jug of industrial-strength bleach, it practically winked at me. It was like fate had left me a gift. And the more I mulled it over, the more I realized this wasn't just payback, it was poetic justice. Karen and her friends wanted to treat my pool like their private spa, fine. I'd give them the spa treatment, complete with skin irritation and frizzy hair. Of course I had to be smart. The last thing I needed was a lawsuit. Karen might be shameless, but she wasn't stupid. If anything permanent happened, she'd drag me through court faster than you can say trespassing. No, what I needed was discomfort, not danger. Embarrassment, not injury. A sting to the pride and the vanity. So I did what any responsible homeowner plotting revenge would do. I researched. Late at night when my wife was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through pool maintenance forums. I read about pH levels, chlorine shock treatments, and what happens when you accidentally overdo it. The answers were hilarious. Your hair will dry out and turn brittle. Skin irritation is guaranteed. Bathing suits may fade. Bingo. That was exactly what I needed. The next day, I took a trip to the hardware store. I grabbed a few extra jugs of bleach, tossed them in the cart like I was just another suburban dad tackling spring cleaning, and nodded to the cashier like nothing was out of the ordinary. She didn't know she was ringing up the ingredients for my little masterpiece. At home, I stashed them in the shed tucked behind the lawnmower where Karen never snooped. Then I began planning the timing. Karen had a rhythm, a pattern to her trespassing. Saturdays were her big pool party days. Tuesdays and Thursdays were smaller, just her and maybe one or two friends lounging like queens of the cul-de-sac. I figured Saturday afternoon would be the perfect stage for my little performance. But I wasn't just going to dump the bleach and walk away. Oh no. I wanted to see the results. I wanted to witness the exact moment smugness turned to panic. So I set up my security cameras, angling them just right to capture the pool, the deck, and the gate they always slip through. I even tested the audio feed just in case I got lucky enough to hear Karen shriek. All week I played it cool. I waved politely when I saw her watering her azaleas. She gave me that condescending smile, like she'd won the neighborhood battle. Let her think that. Little did she know the war was just beginning. Friday night, after the kids went to bed, I slipped out back with a jug in each hand. The moonlight shimmered off the pool, water calm and inviting. I twisted open the cap and poured a steady stream into the deep end, watching it swirl like smoke beneath the surface. A second jug followed, then a third. The smell was sharp, chemical biting at the back of my throat. I stirred the water with the pool net, spreading the special treatment evenly. By the time I was done, the water looked the same as always, crystal clear, sparkling under the floodlight. But I knew better. This was no ordinary pool anymore. This was a trap. I stood there for a moment, grinning like a mad scientist over his experiment. Then I whispered to the night, "Enjoy your spa day, Karen." The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I mowed the front lawn, waved at a passing neighbor, even took my kids out for ice cream. Meanwhile, the cameras back home were armed and waiting. When we got back around noon, I checked the footage. Sure enough, right on schedule, the gate creaked open. In marched Karen, strutting like she owned the place, sunglasses, flashing tote bags slung over her shoulder. Behind her trailed three friends giggling like schoolgirls. They dropped their stuff on my deck chairs, stripped down to swimsuits, and dove right in. I leaned closer to the screen. This was it. Showtime. For a few glorious minutes, everything looked the same. Splashing laughter, Karen floating on a neon raft with her wine tumbler in hand. But then, just as I'd predicted, the scratching started. First one of her friends rubbed her arm, frowning. Then another started wiggling her shoulders like something was crawling on her skin. Karen herself reached up and tugged at her hair, confused. And then it happened. She let out a shriek so loud it came through my speakers like a banshee's wail. My hair, oh my God, what's happening to my hair? Her blonde dye job was betraying her strands, turning frizzy and brittle in real time. Her friends scrambled out of the pool, scratching, clutching at their skin, shouting about burning and itching. One of them slipped on the deck, nearly face-planting before limping to a chair. Karen staggered to the edge, her makeup smeared her once perfect hair, sticking out in every direction like she'd been electrocuted. I sat back in my chair, arms folded, grinning from ear to ear. The bleach had done its job. Not dangerous, not permanent, but humiliating as hell. And the best part, I had it all on video. The queen of the HOA had finally gotten a taste of her own medicine, and she was choking on it. If I had to describe the scene in one word, it would be glorious. All those smug afternoons, all those smirks and snide remarks, all the trash and empty bottles they'd left behind, every ounce of frustration I'd bottled up was paying dividends in the form of shrieks, flailing arms, and bad hair day apocalypse. On the camera feed, Karen was thrashing toward the pool ladder like a panicked cat. Her friends weren't faring much better. One woman clawed at her arms, muttering about how her skin was burning. Another, the one I dubbed Wine Ant, stumbled onto the deck, coughing dramatically, her swimsuit already looking faded and sad. And then there was the hair. Oh, the hair. Karen had always been precious about hers. Weekly dye jobs, expensive conditioners, hours spent curling it just right. But bleach doesn't care about vanity. The moment she pulled herself out of the water, her golden mane had transformed into a tangled bird's nest, frizzy and dry, with streaks of orange and near white poking through like a bad Halloween wig. The sight alone was enough to make me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. I hit record on my phone screen, capturing every frame. This wasn't just about personal satisfaction anymore, this was about evidence. If Karen tried to spin the story and paint herself as a victim, I'd have the footage of her trespassing, splashing in my pool, and melting down like a reality television diva. By the time they scrambled out, grabbing towels and screeching at one another, the backyard looked like a war zone. Chairs knocked over wine, spilled soggy chips crushed into the deckboards. Karen's raft drifted sadly in the corner of the pool like a sinking ship. And me, I sat there at the kitchen table with a beer in hand, watching from the security monitor, chuckling like I was tuned into the best sitcom ever made. Should we go out there? My wife asked cautiously, peeking over my shoulder. I shook my head. Nope. Let them figure it out. They wanted to play in my pool. They can suffer the consequences. She smirked, shook her head, and walked away, muttering, "You're evil." "Creative," I corrected. "There's a difference." But the real magic came later that evening. I was out front watering the lawn when Karen stormed past on the sidewalk, wrapped in a robe, her hair sticking out like tumbleweed. She caught my eye and froze. For the first time in months, there was no smirk, no sass, no phony superiority, just raw, simmering embarrassment. "Something's wrong with your pool," she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. It works fine for me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her friends, trailing behind like damp, defeated puppies, avoided eye contact altogether. Not a word. They disappeared into her house, slamming the door, and I swear I heard one of them mutter, "Never again." Mission accomplished. But the fallout didn't stop there. The next few days were even sweeter. Karen skipped her morning HOA patrols. No marching up and down the street with her clipboard, no yelling at kids to keep their bikes off the sidewalk. It was like the queen had abandoned her throne. By midweek, the whispers began. At the coffee shop, I overheard two neighbors chuckling. "Did you see Karen's hair? Looks like a hay bale got electrocuted." At the mailbox, another leaned in and said, "Heard her pool party went badly. Serves her right." Even the usually timid folks, the ones who never dared cross Karen, were laughing behind their hands. And I didn't even have to spread the story myself. The humiliation was self-sustaining. Karen's vanity had always been her weak spot, and now it was being picked apart by the entire neighborhood. Of course, part of me worried she'd come storming back for revenge. That was her style after all. But every time I saw her from a distance, she looked smaller, deflated. Gone was the strut, the high-pitched voice, the holier-than-thou attitude. Instead, she shuffled hiding under hats and scarves like a celebrity dodging paparazzi. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. See, Karen had spent months turning my pool into her stage. She'd flaunted it online, bragged about it to her friends, posted pictures like she owned the place. It wasn't enough for me to simply make her stop. I wanted to flip the script. If she loved attention so much, I'd make sure she got the wrong kind. So one evening I sent the footage anonymously, of course, to a handful of trusted neighbors. Just a little for your information email with the subject line, "Caught on camera pool party crashers." I didn't need to say who it was. The video spoke for itself. Karen and her friends sneaking in, laughing, swimming, and then the meltdown complete with screaming, scratching, and that unforgettable hair disaster. By the next morning, the clip was making the rounds like wildfire. One neighbor texted me, "Oh my God, this is gold." Another said, "Justice at last." And my favorite, "You're a legend." I stayed quiet, of course. Plausible deniability. But inside, I was grinning so wide my face hurt. The best part, Karen couldn't fight back. If she complained, she'd have to admit she'd been trespassing. If she tried to twist the story, the footage would expose her. She was trapped, cornered by her own arrogance. And yet, I knew this was just the beginning. Because Karen was Karen, stubborn to the bone. She might be licking her wounds now, but sooner or later she'd lash out. She always did. The question was, would she try to reclaim her queen bee status, or would she spiral even further? Either way, I was ready. After all, I'd already proven one thing when it came to HOA drama. I wasn't the pushover neighbor anymore. I was the guy with the pool and the bleach. By the time the monthly HOA meeting rolled around, Karen had been laying low for 2 weeks. That alone was a miracle. No patrols, no Facebook rants, no knocking on doors to complain about unsightly trash bins or improperly trimmed hedges. The street had been eerily quiet, like the witch had gone into hibernation. But I knew Karen. She wasn't going to disappear forever. She was the kind of person who lived off control, attention, and drama. Like clockwork, she was going to come back swinging. And sure enough, she did. The HOA held its meetings in the community center down by the lake. Folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and styrofoam cups, the usual. I showed up late, as I always did, because nothing made Karen angrier than watching me stroll in casually while she was mid-speech. Except this time, she wasn't chairing the meeting. She didn't even have a position anymore. Still there, she was in the front row, scarf wrapped around her fried hair, makeup caked on thick to cover the blotchy patches on her face. She sat tall, trying to project authority like she was still the queen bee everyone should defer to. The board president, a calm guy named Michael, cleared his throat and started running through the agenda. Lawn maintenance. Upcoming 4th of July barbecue. Budget for resurfacing the tennis courts. The usual suburban snooze fest. And then Karen pounced. She stood up, interrupting Michael mid-sentence. "I need to address a serious issue in this community," she announced, her voice pitched high like a kettle about to whistle. Michael sighed. "Karen, please wait until open comments." She ignored him. "There is a health hazard in our neighborhood. A swimming pool being improperly maintained, chemicals being misused. Residents, including children, could be at risk." Gasps rippled through the room. A few neighbors glanced around, confused. I kept my face neutral, sipping my bad coffee. Karen pressed on, dramatic as ever. "I myself was affected. I suffered skin, irritation, hair damage, and she touched her scarf, serious personal distress. This is unacceptable. We need to find the homeowner responsible before someone gets hurt." I almost choked on my coffee. She was really doing it. She was actually trying to flip the script and pin this on me. Michael looked bewildered. "Karen, are you saying—" "Yes," she cut in. "That pool is a ticking time bomb. If we allow dangerous chemicals to seep into the neighborhood environment, we could all suffer. I move that the HOA investigate and penalize." That was my cue. I stood up slowly, deliberately, every eye in the room turning toward me. "Karen," I said, voice steady, "are you seriously standing here trying to accuse me of mismanaging my own pool?" Her eyes narrowed. "You admit it," then I smiled. "Oh no. I'm not admitting anything. I'm just pointing out how fascinating it is that you would have first-hand knowledge of my pool's chemical levels." A few chuckles broke out. Karen's face flushed. I was invited. Invited, I raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, because according to my cameras I pulled out my phone, you weren't invited at all." The room went silent. I tapped a button and the television screen at the front of the room flickered to life. I'd come prepared with a USB stick loaded with the footage. And there it was, Karen and her friends sneaking in through my side gate, splashing around, drinking wine, laughing like hyenas. Then came the payoff, Karen clutching her hair, shrieking, her friends scratching and stumbling out of the pool in chaos. The room erupted. Some people gasped. Others burst into laughter they couldn't suppress. One neighbor, an older guy in the back, muttered, "Serves her right." Karen lunged forward. This is an invasion of privacy. You can't. Michael held up a hand. Karen, enough. This footage clearly shows trespassing on private property. You were not invited. You have no grounds to accuse anyone else of wrongdoing. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Another neighbor piped up. Didn't you post pictures of yourself in his pool on Facebook number HOA privilege or something? Karen sputtered. That was taken out of context. The laughter grew louder. The tide had turned. For once, Karen wasn't in control. She wasn't feared. She wasn't even respected. She was a punchline. Michael banged the gavel. This matter is settled. Karen, you and your guests will be issued a fine for trespassing. You are also banned from using community amenities for the next 6 months. Karen's face turned crimson. You can't do this, she screeched. But the room had already moved on. The board shifted to the next item on the agenda, while whispers and chuckles filled the air. Karen slumped in her seat, humiliated scarf slipping just enough to reveal the frizzed, brittle mess underneath. I sat back down, calm as could be, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. How's that for community spirit? Her glare could have melted steel, but it didn't matter anymore. She'd been exposed, stripped of her power, and branded in the eyes of the neighborhood as the fraud she was. And for me, oh, it was better than any victory lap. Walking home that night, neighbors slapped me on the back, grinning. Good job, one said. About time someone stood up to her, another added. I nodded, but inside I was buzzing. Not just from the win, but from the realization that the balance of power had shifted. Karen wasn't untouchable anymore. She wasn't the queen bee. She was just Karen. The woman with ruined hair, a bruised ego, and no allies left. But I also knew something else. Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. People like her never quit. They lick their wounds, bide their time, and plot their comeback. And when she did, I'd be ready. Because I wasn't just the neighbor next door anymore. I was the guy who beat her at her own game. If humiliation were a disease, Karen was patient zero. After the HOA meeting fiasco, her reputation tanked harder than a lead weight in my pool, neighbors whispered. Some openly mocked. Kids on bikes zoomed past her house chanting, "Pool witch, pool witch." I would have felt bad if it weren't so damn satisfying. But Karen was nothing if not stubborn. She wasn't going to take her downfall lying down. Not her. She'd ruled this neighborhood like a tyrant for years. And tyrants don't give up their crown without a fight. So she tried to fight back. First came the gossip campaign. She cornered a few neighbors on morning walks, spinning some half-baked sob story about how I had spiked the pool to deliberately harm her. She painted herself as a victim of chemical warfare, waving her brittle hair around like Exhibit A. But here's the thing, when you've spent years bossing everyone around, no one's eager to join your pity party. Neighbors nodded politely, then crossed the street. Some laughed in her face. One guy, Doug, flat out said, "Karen, you weren't supposed to be in his pool in the first place." That shut her up quick. Next, she tried the legal route. She actually called the police. Yep, full-on 911. My neighbor poisoned me. The officer showed up at my door looking half amused, half exhausted. He explained the situation. I calmly showed him the footage, Karen trespassing, Karen partying, Karen screaming as her bleach-saturated hair fried in the sundae. The officer chuckled, shook his head, and said, "Ma'am, maybe stop breaking into your neighbor's yard." Case closed. By the third strike, Karen was desperate. She marched right up to my door one evening, fists clenched, jaw tight. When I opened, she launched into a tirade. "You think you've won, don't you? You humiliated me. You ruined my life." I leaned against the door frame, calm as a monk. "Karen, you ruined your own life. I just helped speed up the process." Her eyes burned with rage. "This isn't over. People like me don't get pushed aside. People like you," I said slowly, "already have been." I closed the door before she could reply. And for the first time, she didn't bang on it. She just slunk away, defeated. But her spiral didn't end there. Oh no. She tried to throw one more backyard party, inviting her loyalists, what was left of them anyway. Maybe a dozen people showed up. But when they got there, they saw the state of her pool algae growing along the edges, cloudy water, half-broken furniture. Nobody wanted to dip a toe in. They stood around awkwardly, sipping cheap boxed wine, while Karen tried to rally them with speeches about taking back the neighborhood. It didn't work. Within an hour, her guests had trickled out, muttering excuses. Karen stood alone, wineglass trembling in her hand, staring into her murky pool like it might answer her prayers. Meanwhile, my yard was buzzing. Neighbors who'd once kept their distance now waved, stopped by for a beer, even asked if their kids could come over to swim, with permission, of course. For the first time, the community wasn't divided into Karen's subjects and everyone else. It was united, and I had become the unspoken anchor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had spent years using the HOA to bully people into compliance, and now stripped of her power, she was the one being shunned. The final nail in the coffin came a week later. The HOA posted an official notice on the community bulletin board, and in the monthly newsletter, residents are reminded that trespassing into private property is strictly prohibited. Recent incidents have resulted in fines and disciplinary measures. Let this be a warning: respect your neighbor's property. Everyone knew who it was about. They didn't even need to name her. Karen's shame was immortalized in black and white, delivered straight to every mailbox in the neighborhood. I caught her tearing down one of the notices by the community center, hands shaking with fury. A group of teenagers laughed as they walked past. She tried to glare them into silence, but they just kept laughing. That was the moment it hit me. Karen wasn't feared anymore. She wasn't respected. She wasn't even tolerated. She was a joke. And jokes don't run neighborhoods. That Saturday, I sat by my pool again, beer in hand, the water calm and clear. My kids splashed around my wife, read a book, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Real peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about everything that had happened. The bleach, the video, the HOA meeting, the downfall. And I realized something: Karen had always believed she was untouchable. She thought she could take and take and take without consequence. But in the end, she'd been undone by her own arrogance and a little creativity on my part. I didn't just protect my pool, I protected the neighborhood. I reminded everyone that bullies only have power if you let them. Karen had paid the price. And from the look of her wilted roses, her overgrown lawn, and her empty driveway, she'd keep paying it for a long time. But deep down, I knew one last storm was coming. Karen wasn't built to disappear quietly. People like her never do. And when she tried again, I'd be ready. Because this was more than a pool war. This was an HOA war. And I was finally winning. If there's one thing I've learned about people like Karen, it's this: they don't just fade away. They thrash, they claw, they scream, and they drag everyone around them down in the process. So when she went quiet after the HOA newsletter called her out, I knew it wasn't over. Silence wasn't surrender. It was plotting. Sure enough, the storm came. It started with little things. A mysterious dead patch on my front lawn where someone had clearly poured salt. A few trash bags tossed near my driveway in the middle of the night. Petty, childish stuff. The kind of thing Karen thought would send me spiraling. But the truth, I just smiled. She was flailing, losing control. The real climax came at the next HOA community event, the summer block party. It was the first big gathering since her infamous pool bleach meltdown, and everyone knew she'd either try to reclaim her throne or implode trying. I showed up with my family, cool as ever, carrying a cooler of sodas. Neighbors waved, clapped me on the back, and handed me burgers fresh off the grill. It was the friendliest I'd ever seen the community. Meanwhile, Karen slithered in wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, trying to hide the remains of her fried hair. She brought her usual clipboard like she was still in charge. The moment she opened her mouth, people rolled their eyes. She barked about parking violations. She complained about the barbecue smoke. She lectured a kid for riding his scooter too fast. But instead of cowed silence, she got laughter. Instead of compliance, she got mockery. "Careful, Karen," one dad said loudly. "He might need to bleach the pavement after that scooter leaves marks." The whole crowd burst into laughter. Karen's face went beet red. She shrieked, "This is harassment. You can't treat me this way." And that's when Michael, the HOA president, stepped in. Calm, steady, but firm. "Karen, you are no longer on the board. You have no authority here. And given your repeated violations, you should consider yourself lucky you're not facing legal charges." A hush fell over the crowd. Karen froze her mouth, opening and closing. Her clipboard shook in her hands. For years she'd wielded that HOA power like a weapon, and now in front of everyone it was stripped away. I swear you could see the exact moment the crown fell off her head. She dropped the clipboard, turned on her heel, and stormed off. The crowd cheered not out of cruelty, but out of sheer relief. For the first time in years, we were free. That night, sitting by my pool again, I realized Karen had finally paid the price. Not because I ruined her hair, not because I exposed her at the meeting, but because she lost what she valued most: control, attention, and the illusion of power. The pool water shimmered calm and clean. My kids splashed happily. My wife leaned back with a smile. And for the first time since moving here, I felt like this really was my home. Karen was finished, and I was finally at peace. If you've stuck with me this far, here's the part that matters most. This story wasn't just about a pool, or bleach, or one awful neighbor who thought she could stomp all over everyone. It was about boundaries, about standing up for yourself when someone crosses the line, For months, I let Karen walk all over me because I didn't want conflict. I thought keeping the peace meant letting her have her way. But peace without respect isn't peace at all, it's surrender. And surrender only feeds the bully. When I finally acted not just with bleach, but with evidence, with resolve, with creativity, the dynamic changed. Neighbors who once stayed silent started speaking up. People stopped fearing Karen, and the whole community was better for it. That's the lesson: you don't have to fight loud or violent or cruel. You just have to fight smart, stand firm. Use the tools you have, whether it's a camera, a rule book, or yes, even a jug of bleach. So if you're dealing with your own Karen, remember this: you're not powerless. Set your boundaries, protect what's yours, and don't be afraid to make them pay the price when they cross the line. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What's the worst HOA or neighbor story you've ever dealt with? And if you want more outrageous HOA drama, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what's coming next.